Hi, I'm Hannah, 23, and last July I watched in horror as my parents ditched me at the airport gate and flew off with my scheming sister. 2 weeks later, that sister was arrested abroad. It sounds like the plot of a terrible movie, I know. But it was my life. The pieces of my shredded boarding pass felt like confetti for a funeral I didn't know I was attending. My own. I stood there, watching the plane crawl into the sky, feeling the weight of one question crush me. How does a family that's supposed to be your anchor become the storm that sinks you? Before the storm, there was the calm. The San Francisco kind of calm, where the fog rolls in like a soft gray blanket and muffles the world, making everything seem gentle and distant. My life was neat. Orderly. I designed conferences downtown, a job of logistics and careful planning, of making sure hundreds of people end up in the right place at the right time with the right name badge. It's a career built on preventing chaos. My commute was my sanctuary, the only part of my day that felt truly unplanned. Every morning, I'd bike across the Golden Gate Bridge, the salty air whipping my face, the low, mournful groan of the foghorn a constant companion. I loved the routine, the beautiful predictability of it. I'd get home to my small, quiet apartment, a space I kept as pristine as my work schedules. I'd water the little basil plant on my balcony, a daily ritual of hope against experience. It was always wilting, its leaves curling at the edges no matter what I did, a silent accusation in my otherwise perfect apartment. Who waters me? The question would sometimes surface, quiet and unwelcome, before I'd push it down with another work email or a code ping from my laptop. My world was small, but it was mine. Friday nights were for takeout and crime documentaries, my feet tucked under me on the couch. My bookmark was a mint green boarding pass from a trip that never happened 2 years ago, still peeking out from chapter 3 of a paperback I swore I'd finish. It was all fine. Manageable. Until the phone call that cracked the foundation. My pulse stalls. Because right then, a call from my dad felt different. His voice on the line was too bright, a forced, brittle cheerfulness that set my teeth on edge. Hannah, big news. Your mother and I have had a brilliant idea. We're booking a family trip. All four of us. A real one this time, not just a weekend. 2 weeks in Thailand. Sun, sand, no work talk, I promise. It sounded like a script he was reading. It was the dream I'd quietly held onto for years, a fantasy of a family reset, a chance to feel like a unit again, not just four people sharing a last name and a history of missed connections. Lisa, my sister, was already on board, of course. She'd been living back home for a year, finding herself after dropping out of college again, a situation that seemed to involve a lot of sleeping in and borrowing money. I ignored the little flicker of unease, the small voice that whispered, "Why no?" I let myself get swept up in it. I booked my time off work, bought a new swimsuit, and researched restaurants in Phuket. I even checked the airline app every day, just to see the booking there in black and white letters. It felt real. For a week, it felt perfect. Then, the first little crack appeared. A notification from the airline app, a tiny ping late on a Tuesday night as I was getting ready for bed. Your itinerary has been updated. I opened it. My seat assignment, 14A, a window seat I'd specifically chosen, was gone. Just blank. An empty space where I was supposed to be. I texted the family group chat, my message deliberately light. "Hey, weird app glitch, my seat disappeared." Dad replied almost instantly, "Weird tech glitch, honey. Don't worry, I'll call them in the morning. It's all fine." I chose to believe him. Because the alternative was too complicated, too ugly to consider. It was all fine. Doubt isn't a lightning strike. It's a slow leak. A drip, drip, drip of poison in the back of your mind until one day you realize you're drowning in it. The day after the seat assignment vanished, Lisa posted a selfie on Instagram. She was holding up her new passport, fanning it out like a winning poker hand. Her smile was wide and smug, an expression I knew well. It was her "I got what I wanted" smile. The caption was the real gut punch, getting ready for an adventure with the ones who matter most. I stared at the screen, the words blurring, my thumb hovering over the photo, zooming in on her face, on the background, looking for, what? A clue? An apology? The ones who matter most. Not the people I love most. It was a ranking. A declaration. It was probably nothing. A clumsy choice of words. She was dramatic. But the drip continued, faster now. I stopped breathing. Because right then, I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the San Francisco fog. I called Mom later that week, needing to hear her voice, needing some reassurance. Hey Mom, just checking in. Getting excited. Her voice was strained, thin. Of course, sweetheart. It'll be lovely. But there was no warmth in it. I could hear something else underneath her words, a tremor of anxiety she was trying to suppress. I asked about Dad. Oh, he's fine. A little tired. You know. I did know. I remembered visiting 2 weeks prior. He'd seemed distracted, forgetful. I'd asked him, Dad, you take your pill? He'd fumbled for the amber vial on his nightstand, a bottle that should have been half empty. Instead, it was almost full. He shook it, but instead of the familiar, lively rattle of dozens of tiny pills, there was just a dull, lonely thud of a few. He'd forced a grin, but his eyes didn't match. Time locks up. Because right then, the memory connected to the phone call with a jolt. The full bottle. His tiredness. Mom's anxiety. I pushed the thought away with violent force. I was being paranoid. I was creating a conspiracy out of coincidence. I was the responsible one, the planner. Lisa was the free spirit, the charming mess. Maybe I was just jealous. Jealous that she got to be home with them, that she was their focus, their project. It was an ugly thought, and I hated myself for it. So I buried it deep. I focused on the trip. I packed my bags with methodical precision. I triple-checked my documents. The day of the flight arrived, a bright, clear morning in early July. The airport was buzzing, a hive of happy energy that felt like a mockery. We checked our bags. Dad handed over the passports in a neat stack. Everything was painfully normal. We went through security, a smooth, practiced dance. We found our gate, and I felt the knot in my stomach finally begin to unwind, just a little. We were doing it. We were going on a family vacation. We had an hour before boarding, so we grabbed coffee. Lisa was quiet, her face buried in her phone, thumbs flying across the screen. Mom kept smoothing her shirt, a nervous tick I knew meant she was deeply uncomfortable. Dad was trying to make jokes, but they fell flat in the tense air between us. I freeze. Because right then I realized I was the only one talking, filling the silence with pointless chatter about the weather in Phuket, about a new restaurant I'd read about. I was performing normalcy for an audience that wasn't even watching. Lisa didn't look up from her phone once. Not when the gate agent announced pre-boarding for families with small children. Not even when our zone was called. We gathered our things and shuffled into the line, me in front. I handed my boarding pass and passport to the agent at the desk, forcing a smile. He scanned it. Beep. An error message flashed. He scanned it again. Beep. He frowned, his eyes flicking from the screen to my face, his professional pleasantness replaced by a flicker of confusion. I'm sorry, miss. There seems to be a problem. My blood went cold. A problem? What kind of problem? I checked in yesterday. He typed for what felt like an eternity, the click-clack of the keys like a ticking clock. Your ticket, it's showing as canceled. Canceled? The word didn't compute. It was like he'd said it in a foreign language. No, that's impossible. I confirmed it. There must be a mistake. Can you check again? I could feel my family behind me, their silence of physical, suffocating weight. I'm sorry, the agent said, his voice laced with that infuriating, practiced pity that service workers use for unsolvable problems. It was canceled online this morning, just after midnight. The cancellation came from the same IP address that booked the tickets. There's nothing I can do. The flight is fully booked. My pulse stalls. Because right then, my dad stepped forward, his voice weak. There has to be some mistake. Can't you just put her on the flight? The agent shook his head, his patience wearing thin. The flight is closed, sir. Final boarding call was 2 minutes ago. He looked past me, at my parents, at my sister. You three need to board now or you'll miss it. I turned, my heart hammering against my ribs, a trapped bird. I looked at my mom, her face a mask of pale, helpless panic, her eyes darting everywhere but at me. I looked at my dad, his expression a confusing, gut-wrenching mix of frustration and something else. Resignation. As if this was an outcome he had already accepted. Then I looked at Lisa. She was already halfway down the jet bridge, but she glanced back over her shoulder, as if feeling my stare. She caught my eye, and she smirked. A tiny, triumphant, venomous lift at the corner of her mouth. The world shattered. It broke apart in agonizing sequence. First, the sight. The gate agent, trying to be helpful, to clear the line, took my useless boarding pass. With a brisk, final tear, he ripped it in half and dropped the pieces into the bin beside him. I watched the two mint green scraps of paper flutter down, separating as they fell, two halves of a promise that would never be whole. My future bifurcated. Then, my parents. They didn't fight. They didn't scream or demand to speak to a manager. They didn't choose me. My dad just looked at me, his face collapsing in on itself. Hannah. We have to go. Lisa's already on board. My mother wouldn't meet my eyes. She just clutched her purse, her knuckles white, and hurried after him. And they walked away. I watched their backs get smaller and smaller as they disappeared down the jet bridge. Then came the sound. The final, automated voice over the PA system. Final boarding call for Flight TG623 to Bangkok. It echoed in the cavernous terminal, a sterile, indifferent sentence that sealed my fate. The click of the gate doors swinging shut. And then silence. A profound, ringing silence where my family used to be. My own breathing was ragged, a harsh counterpoint to the quiet. I stopped breathing. Because right then Lisa's wink replayed in my mind. It wasn't a shared joke. It was a trigger pull. She'd won. I just didn't know what the game was yet. Finally touch. The cold, polished linoleum of the airport floor. I don't remember deciding to sit down, but suddenly I was there, my carry-on bag slumped next to me, a useless prop. My hands felt empty, numb. I had an absurd urge to fish the torn pieces of my boarding pass out of the trash, to try and tape them back together, as if that would fix anything. The ride home was a blur. The BART train rattled and swayed, every screech of the wheels a fresh accusation. They left you. They left you. My apartment, my neat, orderly sanctuary, felt like a tomb. I walked in and saw the wilting basil. For the first time, I felt a kinship with it. Stranded. Left behind. Forgotten. The next 2 days were a vacuum of time and space. I called out of work, telling my boss I had a family emergency, a lie that tasted like ash in my mouth. I didn't eat. I didn't sleep. I just sat on the couch, the TV off, my phone silent, staring at the mint green paperback on my coffee table, the one that used to mark a story, but now just marked a grave. The grave of the family I thought I had. I was so wrapped up in my own shock and grief, in the deafening silence, that I almost missed the next drip. The third day my phone rang, startling me so much I almost dropped it. It was my mom, her voice a frantic whisper, thin and crackly from halfway across the world. Hannah? Oh, thank God. Hannah, something's wrong. I freeze. Because right then, the thick fog in my head started to clear, replaced by a cold, sharp dread. Mom? What is it? Where's Dad? He's not well, she sobbed, the sound dissolving into static. We can't find his heart medication. The whole bottle, Hannah, it's gone. I've looked everywhere. In his suitcase, in my purse, it's just gone. The image of the 2 full pill bottle on his nightstand flashed in my mind. The dull thud instead of a healthy rattle. It wasn't my paranoia. It was a warning I hadn't known how to read. And that's not all, she continued, her voice dropping lower, as if she was afraid of being overheard. My passport. It's missing. I had it at the airport, I know I did, but now, it's not in the hotel safe. It's nowhere. A memory surfaced, hazy at first, then sharpening into painful focus. The blurry security camera footage from the lobby of my parents' building a week before the trip. I had gone to drop something off and noticed the concierge rewinding the tape. He'd grumbled about a package theft. On the screen, I'd seen a small figure in a lilac hoodie, Lisa's favorite, slipping out the side door at an odd hour. I hadn't thought anything of it. My inner flaw has always been my hunger for approval. I spent my life collecting crumbs of praise from my parents like they were holy relics, so terrified of upsetting the balance that I never stopped to notice the plate was always empty. I remember in high school, I won a statewide science award. I came home, buzzing, and found them arguing with Lisa about her grades. I put my award on the kitchen counter and waited. They never noticed it. After an hour, I quietly put it in my room. That was my role, to be the no-maintenance child, the one who never added to their burdens. While I was busy being good, Lisa was busy being strategic. I had been so focused on being worthy of their love that I never considered someone else might be trying to steal it. My pulse stalls. Because right then I understood. This wasn't a series of unfortunate events. This was a coup. A meticulously planned, ruthlessly executed takeover of my family. The canceled ticket, the hidden medicine, the stolen passport. It was all her. And my parents, my brilliant, capable physician parents, were her hostages. "Mom," I said, my own voice sounding strangely calm, detached, as if it belonged to someone else. "What does Lisa say about all this?" A choked sob. She's saying terrible things, Hannah. She says this is our fault. She told us, she said if we tried to leave, if we didn't do what she wants, she'd go to the medical boards. She has letters, she showed them to us. My blood ran cold. Letters? What letters? They look official, Mom whispered, her voice cracking. They're complaints. Faked ones, they have to be. Forged letterheads from old patients. Accusing us of malpractice. Of negligence. Terrible things. She said she'll disown us. Publicly. Ruin our careers. Unless we disown you. The words hung in the air, a monstrous, unthinkable sentence. Disown me. That was the price. My existence for their reputation. And they were considering paying it. They had already made the down payment at the airport gate. Time locks up. Because right then, the grief inside me didn't just curdle, it crystallized. It turned from a messy, hot sorrow into something cold, hard, and sharp. The part of me that used to cry just went silent. The part of me that used to plead for their attention died. A new part of me took over. The conference planner. The logistics expert. The one who sees a crisis not as an end, but as a complex problem with a series of actionable solutions. "Mom," I said, my voice steady, sharp. "Listen to me very carefully. Do not panic. Panicking is what she wants. Go to the hotel lobby right now. Tell them your passport is stolen and you need to contact the US Embassy. Do not tell Lisa where you are going. Tell me the name of your hotel." But Lisa, forget Lisa, I cut her off, the words like chips of ice. She has no power if you don't give it to her. You are doctors. You are adults. She is a child throwing a tantrum with a bomb. It's time to stop letting her hold the detonator. There was a long silence on the other end of the line, just the sound of my mother's ragged breathing. Then a shaky okay. I hung up and went to my laptop, my fingers flying across the keyboard. The planner in me was in full control now. I found the hotel's website, got the number for their head of security. I called the US Embassy in Bangkok and reported a stolen passport and a case of medical coercion and illegal confinement involving American citizens. I used precise, emotionless language. I was no longer a daughter. I was a witness. I was a case manager. I wired my parents' money through a secure app, enough for a new flight home, if it came to that, with the message, emergency use only. For the first time in my life, I wasn't asking for their help. I was orchestrating their rescue. I wasn't the daughter begging for a seat on the plane. I was air traffic control, clearing a runway for them to land safely. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I made a list. I sent emails. I coordinated with strangers thousands of miles away. I felt a strange, quiet power humming in my veins. It wasn't happiness, not even close. But it was control. It was purpose. For years I had begged for a place at their table, content with whatever scraps they offered. Now I was building my own table. A war table. The call came 48 hours later. This time, it was my dad. His voice was broken, hollowed out. He told me everything, the words spilling out in a rush. After my mom had slipped away to the lobby to call the embassy, Lisa had cornered him in their hotel room. She had realized she was losing control. She had reiterated her threats, waving the forged malpractice claims in his face, her voice escalating into a shriek. He said that was the moment he finally saw her, really saw her, not as his troubled daughter, but as a stranger wearing her face, her eyes glittering with a coldness that terrified him. He told her it was over, that they were going home, with or without her. That's when she snapped. He said she went to her suitcase and pulled out a small kitchen knife she must have stolen from a restaurant. Not to hurt him, he thought, but as the ultimate hostage-taking tool, a threat to hurt herself. A final, desperate gambit for control. My mother had returned with the hotel security manager just as Lisa raised the knife. The manager had already been briefed by the embassy. He had local police with him. My dad said the world seemed to move in slow motion. The chaos in the hotel atrium. The flicker of the overhead lights on the polished blade. My mother's scream. The sharp, definitive click of handcuffs snapping around my sister's wrists as she fought and spat. He said a Thai police sergeant looked at the scene, the terrified tourists, the shattered ceramic pot Lisa had knocked over, my weeping parents, my snarling sister, and muttered in quiet, perfect English, "Vacation's over." They were home 2 days later. They called from the taxi, their voices small, asking if they could come over. I said yes. I stood at my kitchen window, watching their cab pull up. They looked old, beaten, smaller than I remembered. They walked into my apartment, the one they'd never bothered to visit before, and stood there looking lost, like refugees in a foreign land. My dad saw the basil plant on the balcony, now completely brown and shriveled, a brittle skeleton. He walked over to it and touched a dead leaf, which crumbled to dust at his touch. "We failed you, Hannah," he said, his voice thick with a shame so profound it was almost visible. "As parents. In every way that matters. We failed you." My mom just wept, silent, racking tears streaming down her face. They stood in my kitchen and they confessed everything, the whole sordid story. How Lisa had manipulated them for months, a slow, steady campaign of psychological warfare, playing on their fears of aging, of losing their relevance. How she'd intercepted my calls, twisted my words, convinced them I was dismissive of them, too busy with my own life in the city to care. How she tucked away Dad's heart medication, a little at a time, making him feel more and more foggy, more dependent on her. It was a long, ugly, painful story, and they told it all. They begged for my forgiveness. They wept for mercy right there, in the middle of my life, a life they had never truly seen. And as I listened, I didn't feel rage anymore. I just felt a vast, quiet emptiness. The war was over. The enemy was vanquished. But the battlefield was my own heart, and it was decimated. If this story resonates with the feeling of being unseen, let me know you're here with a like or a comment. Healing isn't a straight line. It's a jagged, clumsy path. My sister was eventually deported back to the US, charged with extortion and assault. She's in court-mandated therapy now. I don't speak to her. I have a restraining order. I don't know if I ever will see her again outside of a courtroom. My parents, that's more complicated. They sold their house, the one I grew up in, a place now haunted by ghosts I couldn't bear to face. They moved into a smaller place, closer to the city. Closer to me. Forgiveness isn't a switch you can flip. Some days, I wake up and the anger is fresh, a raw wound. I'll see a plane in the sky or hear an airport announcement on a TV show, and I'm right back there, on that cold linoleum floor, watching them walk away. But other days are better. Last Saturday, my dad came over. He didn't call first, just showed up with a new pot and a bag of soil and a tiny, vibrant green basil plant. He didn't say much. He just knelt on my balcony and carefully, gently, repotted the new basil in the place where the old one had died. We worked in silence for a long time, the only sounds the scrape of the trowel and the low, familiar moan of the foghorn from under the Golden Gate Bridge. He patted the soil down around the new plant, his hands, a surgeon's hands, surprisingly gentle. He looked up at me, his eyes full of a grief I was only just beginning to understand. The grief for the daughter he almost threw away. The trust isn't there yet. Not completely. It's like this new basil plant, a fragile seedling that needs sun and water and time. So much time. My life is quiet again, but it's a different kind of quiet. It's not the neat, orderly silence of before, which was born of loneliness. This is the silence of a space I've cleared out, a silence of possibility, ready for something new to grow. I'm the conference planner of my own heart now. I'm building my own foundation, one that isn't dependent on anyone else's approval or permission. I'm learning to water myself. It's harder than it looks. But the leaves on my new basil plant are green, and they're unfurling. I'm not sure what the next chapter holds, but stick around if you want to find out. Trust rebuilds leaf by leaf.